Hi guys, back again for the latest episode. I think episode 3 now of Question Time Live. Yeah, might be a bit fragmented this week. I've not got Steve with us, so I'm winging it on my own, managing the comments and bringing everyone in. So if my eyes are wandering, it's because I've got eyes on everything that's going on the screen. So yeah, not too much to say. First of all, I've got two cool guests lined up. So yeah, we'll get straight into it. I think first up we've got Anthony, aka Crafty Coy, who's got his YouTube channel. So let's bring him in. How are you doing, Anthony?
Hi, Ricky. Nice to see you, mate. You well?
Yeah, very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. Can you hear me all right with this headset? Because it's cheap.
Yeah,
It's only
yeah,
20
no,
quid.
No. It's all good, mate. Nice and clear. So yeah, what have we got for me then, mate?
Right then, mate. So firstly, let me say thank you for inviting me onto the show. As you know,
Pleasure.
I'm a massive fan of yours and the Koi Talk that both you and Chris do. And personally, before I say anything, I want to say thank you for doing that because,
Pleasure,
like
mate.
I've spoke to Chris before, it's definitely something that's been missing from the hobby, and it really helps us understand what's going on. So really appreciate it.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's nice to hear. Thank you.
So with regards to what we're here for today, I've got a few things, and I'm going to try and fast forward time a little bit because although we're currently just entering into the winter period and everyone's covering their ponds and everything, I want to be a little bit more prepared for the jobs that are coming up rather than being reactive. So be more proactive is what I'm looking at. So what I'm looking for is the tips on moving out of the winter session into spring, and what you would recommend people do, obviously on the scale of keeping koi, with regards to feeding, whether quantity has anything to do with things like that. So is there anything that you can help or advise so we can get things underway prior to the springtime?
Is there any specifics around it, or just the general procedure to make it as smooth as possible?
Just more general, because it's more about the learning curve about what it is that we need to do. So if there's anything like questions that come from that, I'll fire them in if that's all right.
Yeah. So I think first one is probably to look at, I think this got touched upon last week, I can't remember, but dream scenario. Obviously, the problem with spring is the instability. And this is a massive problem because you get caught in where things are at the minute, cold. To be honest with you, it's cold, but it's stable. So to the biggest extent, it's a decent scenario because the fish are where they are. You're not swinging, altering out. They are where they are. You just keep that scenario ticking over, and it is what it is. They'll be fine with it. It's when we obviously start, getting them warm spring days where we start lifting a few degrees and not holding it at night, and we're falling. And then we get into awkward temperature bands as well, where you may be sitting between, 12 and 16 degrees, probably on average, and have that general fluctuation throughout a day as well. That is what creates a lot of the issues, because the koi's immune system is in no man's land. What's happened there, mate?
Mate, you have technology.
Oh, we've lost him. Oh, sorry guys, I just took him out a minute. We'll get him back. You back, mate?
Yeah, technology, don't buy it, man, because it fails on you. Sorry about that, dude.
No, it's fine. So yeah, I think that's obviously the biggest issue is this instability. So the koi's immune system's here and there, but the environment it creates is a really good environment for parasites, first of all. And if we look at your filtration side as well, mechanically everything's fine. That works when it works, but biologically things aren't that active either. So obviously you filter bacteria, your nitrosomonas, which converts the ammonia to nitrite, that's a lot hardier, more resilient. But you can get caught out quite easily early spring by, all the fish are up at the top looking for food. Your filter's still asleep. You start chucking some food at them, and that's something your pond's got to adapt to, because it might have not had a lot of food in there for a long time, or you very quickly you're feeding double the amount. Before you know it, you've got an ammonia spike at say 12, 14 degrees. And the fish are really not going to like that because their body's just sort of focusing and coping with everything else that's going on anyway. So it's a tough scenario, that one. But one thing to be mindful of. So the temperatures, let's say, coming back to dream scenario here for me is that obviously you've got some form of heating. Now, I know straight away this makes a lot of people wince and go crazy, but how I'm looking at, there's loads of different ways you can invest in the hobby. Yeah, whether that's you choose to use a more expensive food, the certain equipment you buy, pumps you buy, whatever it is, there's loads of different ways investing in it. That one for me. So even if you could give your pond a stable sort of 12 degrees as opposed to all the swings and the lift, or when it's lifted, just hold it there a little bit to give it some more stability rather than the big drops, you'll gain. But for me, I see so much enhancement to be had in the hobby by having more control over temperatures. More stability means more success. That's just in general fish keeping. If you obviously take aside raising, which is one I come back to a lot because it's my biggest passion in it, obviously that's something you can't really do properly without heating. But the more stability you can add at that time of year, the more successful you can be, without a doubt. When you haven't got that, obviously we're on to dealing with it as best as we can then. So first of all, obviously you want to avoid any major sort of changes at that time of year. Temperature swinging. So like I say, food, you want to control food. Don't just start going crazy with that because all of a sudden they're up at the top and looking really active. You've got to slowly build it up so the filter can build with it as well.
Yeah.
And that's not just that scenario is not just winter. That happens in summer as well.
Of course. I mean, that was one question that I've got lined up a bit further on, which is most packaging or the general consensus on feeding is throw food in, let the fish eat for as much as they can for 10 minutes, then take everything out. I see that as like any waste out. I see that as quite wasteful. But with the introduction and the success of auto feeders coming more and more affordable on the market, obviously
absolutely.
we're not always there to control that. So one thing that I've struggled to be able to research is how much weight of food do you put into a pond to keep it on a stable environment?
Yeah, great. There is different methods to this, and there is stuff out there. Obviously, you talk about percentages of body weight, and there's the two ways you can take now. The scientific approach is to weigh fish and then feed a percentage of body weight, which again you hear figures sort of like 1 to 2% of body weight for general maintenance, getting up to 3% for growth, certainly in tow side.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work. Again, that's moving into the realms of making what's a hobby for some into a job, and that's something I'm always mindful of. My side of the fence, it is my job, so there's a bit more, there's resources, there's people around to help with that. But if it came down, you imagine having to lift your fish every, let's say, 4 weeks in summer to weigh them to get an average to recalculate your feeding. Not only it's a huge amount of stress, that's a job for a lot of people. That's having all then the equipment, the scales, the job lot. Not something I'd be advising. Because obviously you're probably in a mixed pond as well. You've got a completely different thing. You might have small towsai in there up to big lumps. So to get it accurate, you need to be weighing every fish. When I'm doing it, most fish are within a certain size of each other because that's important for the growth pattern. So I can get a sample out, biggest lot, and create an average and get it as near to damn it. It's not a lot of work. What you'd be doing in that case is interrupting the feeding. And one thing you find crucial in feeding, because of the filtration, everything, you want to slowly be building them feeding levels up. Now, to go through a netting session, it's imperative that you stop that feeding for at least 2 to 3 days, allow them to empty their gut out and reduce the stress on them while you're catching them. So you can see there all of a sudden you've been building up. You have to stop, you crash down again, then you have to start building, which you'll be doing for probably a week or so to get back to the other level before you go again. So every interruption in that chain is slowing down, and that will result in lost growth somewhere along your summer season. So the other sort of way to it, the way I do, using an auto feeder, and this was what was taught to me by breeders in Japan. So when I was 16, I went out. Literally, I'd finished school a couple of months, spent a couple of months working in my dad's shop, and then I went out to live with some breeders over the summer period. And it was there, obviously, that was a time of year where all the work's being done on the mud pond complexes. They're, feeding every day, culling, and doing everything to raise the fish and get them ready for harvest. And that was an eye opener for me, seeing what they actually do. Because straight away I'm thinking, obviously these are mud ponds. They're doing a lot of this blind. Can't really see the fish. A great thing. You can, obviously, there's a certain amount of clarity towards the top of the ponds in some, and you can catch them at feed time. And it weren't until then I realised, yeah, you really are getting some of the stuff that they taught me. So adjusting feeding levels, obviously they've got the natural food that they're eating, so that is what it is. You can't control that. And then it's a case of they are feeding manually by automatically, by auto feeders. And that's where it gets interesting. So they're setting up a time scale for the feed, probably roughly between every 2 to 3 hours, depending on what age of fish it is. And what the main trick was they would go to a spot on a pond every day around the same time. Now, you talk about attention to detail. This is one thing I love with the Japanese. So the person that I really got along was Makoto Tanaka, who's now the MD of Nishikigoi Niigata Direct. So, and he actually made a joke. I go, same time, same day, same place, and same clothes, all the rest of it. But the point he was getting at was that's roughly how they're doing it. So they go just before a feed is due to go off, roughly, or some same time to feed a bit of food manually, just to observe the fish's behavior. Because when you've got the experience, the fish will tell you everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And that could be that how sluggish they are towards the food, or how ravenous they are towards the food, or whether they're even, bothered. You chuck it on and all of a sudden you don't see anything, and that tells you there's something, wrong, and you need to be looking for it. And that's what they're doing, feeding it blind. And the one interesting thing they did was, whether it be an automatic feed or a manual feed they give at this point, they're using it to time how quickly the fish eat it. So if it was the feeder going off, and they determined that they wanted them fish to be eating for say 10 minutes, they would obviously study them eating, get the timer set so it's taking 10 minutes to eat. This is really as a non-scientific approach, but the thing we're looking for is you've got to keep bridging the gap as the fish are growing. You get one feeding level right. So obviously in the case of our ponds, you'd find a feeding level where everything's comfortable. So providing your pond could take, blocks of 10-minute feeds, not all of them would, be probably more suited to 5 minutes. You get your feeder set on your feeding regime that you're doing. You pick one of them feeds, you watch it, right, I've got the level set now, that's taking them 5 minutes to feed. You let that run for a while, let your system adjust to it, get everything set, everything right. Everything's coping. Then obviously what I do personally, and this is what the Japanese were doing at that point, is they go to these feeds, the time, and what we're looking for is a drop off in how long it's taking them for them to eat. So if all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, I'm watching a feed and that's dropped from 10 minutes down to 9 minutes or 8 minutes, I know it's time to give a little increase to the feeder to bring it back to 10 minutes, because the fish have naturally grown, their appetite's bigger, therefore they need more food to bring it back in line. It's a really, really simple method.
So that would even peak and trough at different times during the day as well, I'm assuming.
That's why I choose one feed and try and keep it at a stable time. So if I'm monitoring a pond, so I know it could be like the 12 o'clock feed or the 2 o'clock feed. I go in 5 minutes before, so they don't actually know that I'm there, so the natural behavior doesn't change. And then obviously, it's enough time for them to become settled, and I just watch from a distance to see how long it takes to clear up. And I try to hit the same one every day, because rightly so, sometimes they'll be a bit more sluggish in the morning. Other times, they'll be more ravenous more towards the evening. So it is getting a gauge. It's good to watch 2 or 3 if you can, just to get a good idea of what's going on. But yeah, it's all just done visually. And then it's a case of I'm using that to gauge how much food I'm putting in. I'm visually checking the fish as well. Are the fish looking too thin? Are they looking too fat? For example, I mean, with Tosai, you have to watch, obviously, because generally I want a little gut on Tosai through the day, because the feeding stops in my case at 10 p.m. at night. They're running from 10 till 6 in the morning with nothing at water at 24 and 25 degrees. So obviously they are in a resting state for part of that. But yeah, so gut throughout the day. And then what I'll do is I'll try and catch some of them feeds at sort of like, 5, 6 in the morning sometimes before it goes off, just to make sure that gives me a true indication of the actual body shape at that point. and not a body shape when they've been eating all day. It's no different for us. When we've had a great big meal, you're bulging, aren't you?
I'm like that anyway, to be fair. The best part's up here, but that's debatable. But that's good, mate, because I've just had a JBL feeder bought for me at Christmas, and it's got 24 cycles of feeds, but then you notice there's different volumes, but there's nothing there really that gives you an indication of how you should feed, because every pond's different and it's all stocked differently.
And that's the other bit to it, mate. Obviously, while I've got this regime going on, it's all a case then of managing what comes from that. So that's managing the water and everything else based on that feeding level. Whereas I think the general thing to go, and it's probably the safe way, but again, it comes down to experiences. Most people manage the water and feed based on sort of what the water's doing. I feed based on what the koi need and deal with everything else that comes from it.
Yeah.
Because
so what's the right way of doing it?
Feeding is the interesting one. If you've got the experience to do it and the guidance, the way I'm doing it, I mean, a lot of probably most people watching this, they've seen a lot of the results in my videos.
Yeah,
and it's being done, but that's being done, against stocking levels. Anybody would say feeding levels. It's a completely counterintuitive way of fish keeping, but it's done on instinct and experience. And unfortunately, that's not something I could document it easily in articles and things like that. But unfortunately, I'm not there if the shit hits the fan and something starts going wrong.
Yeah,
that's the bit I can't help with because I'm not there. That's why, to be honest, I don't open up too much about the in-depths of the regimes and things like that, because through fear that somebody would take it all as gospel and go and destroy their whole collection. Because it's the sort of feeding that is on the edge of a disaster. That's being completely honest about it. It's treading the edge, and that's how a lot of the breeders do it as well, because we're maxing everything out. We're pushing things to the edge.
Yeah, but you're there for a reason to do that. When you're a hobbyist, you haven't got the time that you can dedicate to being on the edge. You just want a nice pond with some decent results. So nice one, mate.
But I think in general, it's just I think a sort of 5-minute feeding window is going to work best for most ponds, and then it's just a case of setting out how many times per day you're going to do that. Now, to be honest, if it's anything 22 degrees or below, that wants to be no more than about 3 or 4 hours between feeds in a day. You need a period in the evening of rest. I use that for the pond to recuperate. It gives time for the fish to rest. You could carry on feeding, but you're keeping the fish active all the time. I don't believe that to be good for them. So they get their rest. They get their rest period. It allows the system to recover as well. Obviously, the filters work without doses of food and ammonia being dropped in constantly. And come morning time again, you're ready to go. But I think every 4 hours. I get to the point of every 2 hours, especially with toe side, but that's when I'm hitting 24, 25 degrees. And not many ponds are doing that naturally unaided.
Well, to be fair, you've hit the nail on the head for me, because it makes me understand how to use the equipment that's been bought, because I was quite mindful that I'm just going to dump feed in and then forget about it, and then all my filtration and my water quality is all knackered within a matter of days, and it's like then you got another problem just through not controlling your feed. But it was
completely. But it's big topic. But I would say, and it's one we are going to be doing more work on, especially with Koi Talk and the magazine, because I think the thing with koi in general, I believe most ponds are being underfed. And that's not through anybody's fault. It's through the lack of education and knowledge out there for people to do it any differently.
It's just the knowledge out there, mate, which is why I put it to you. It's difficult to find a decent sort of solution to, So it's something that's bothered me for a long time, because it's so difficult to get right. And without an auto feeder, you're not getting the best out of the hobby.
And to be honest with you, another thing feeders are handy for is consistency, because consistency is one of the things, or inconsistency is one of the things that creates a lot of problems. So just take summer, for example. Fluctuations, the fish's appetite will change massively between, say, being 18, 20 degrees or a really hot week where it's 25. Because ponds can do it. And what you do all of a sudden at 25, you'll get away with it a bit more because the filter bacteria is at maximum as well. But if you're sort of around that 18-20 band, you might find variations, and all of a sudden, one day, if you've not got any control on feeding, one day accidentally you might feed twice the amount, or do that for a couple of days on the bounce. Then before you know it, that's a load that your filter's not working to, because the whole pond will adapt based on stocking and feeding.
Yes.
That's it. And it can't just naturally adapt because you decide to change it from one day to the next. It takes time. And that's why I say we build feeding up slowly, so everything gets in sync with it.
It's a living thing at the end of the day. So, you can't just expect things to appear and disappear at a click of a finger. So, I totally agree. Brilliant.
Happy days.
Thank you very much, dude.
We're not got anything else.
Appreciate it. Do you want more? I didn't know if you wanted more.
I thought you said you got a big long list for me. How long have we been on? We've got 10 more minutes for you.
Okay, mate. Right. So what I'd like to look at now is different food types, because there's such a huge market. Now, not everybody can afford 125 quid full of Sakai Hikari food.
Okay.
Or your JPDs, etc. And personally, I'm quite a fan of Medikoi, because I think it's sort of a mid-range. Although be it I will be moving across to the more snobby food as and when time prevails. Now, looking at ingredients, we've got such a vast array of foods. Now, we know that wheat germs used mainly in the winter months, and then you're looking for higher protein during the summer, etc. And we've got balanced foods. Now, if we're looking to get maximum growth, we're going to concentrate on protein. But what if we just want a stable food that maximizes in fish health, little bit of growth, bit of color enhancing, etc., etc.? What is the best way of getting a balance without paying through your nose?
Yeah, that's the tough one, because obviously nutrition is anything across all life, for human, for us, for fish. It's everything. We all know about the quality of stuff and the effect the lower quality nutrition can have on us and fish and all the rest of it. So the first thing, bringing on your first comment, the one thing I will encourage you to do, you say about sake being 120 odd quid a sack. That's for a sack. Yeah. Obviously, there's other sides. I'm not going to get into a sales pitch here, but the one thing I would encourage everybody to do, rather than looking at the initial cost prices, is break these cost prices down to the price per kilo, just to level out the comparative of what it's actually costing against one brand, because it's all right to compare a sack and then compare it against a 5 kilo bag or something like that. You don't actually know what you're paying per kilo. I've not done this myself yet, so I don't know. And I'm going to, because I'm really curious to know actually how much more per kilo something like sake is versus some real inferior shit, to be honest. Because knowing the difference, you might actually be the fool buying that inferior shit, because you're nearly paying as much per kilo. It's just that the initial outlay is a little bit more. Depending on what size you buy. So everybody watching, I would encourage them to do that and actually do your research in that respect before just looking at the headline price, which is, holy shit, that bag of sake colours £200 odd, whatever it is. So look at that bit, because obviously you can get it in different sizes, as you can with all foods, and that'll give you a gauge of how much more expensive it is. I've got a bit sidetracked here. Other than that, your initial thing, I mean, I think we touched on this last week with Chris from Lee, if I remember right, but there's not really anything else out there for me I can be recommending, because I'm just so, there's very few things you would get me to recommend full stop, and I'd like to think when I say something like that, it comes from a genuine place. I put my money where my mouth is with sake hikari. That stuff, I spend a fortune on that. Since last year, it got thrown at me. Last week I think it was. But I'm absolutely. I enjoy every penny I spend on it, because the stuff brings that much benefit. So in that realm, if you come in that respect, sake balance being the cheapest one in the range, is far greater in my opinion than any other food out there, than anything else. The only other things different or better would be in the sake range itself.
Okay.
And that you can feed in a very diverse temperature range as well, because one thing you touched on there, I don't actually use wheat germ. Never have done. Well, I'd say I never have done. I have done in the past, and that's the reason I don't use it now, because I'm not a big fan of it. And what I've tended to find was, obviously, a lot of it just basically passes through and gets shitted out. And also, in the past, when I've used wheat germs, they tend to get quite gutty underneath, really heavy on the bellies, and that I do not like. So I would rather not feed when it's just cut. I mean, what temperature are you at the minute?
4 or 5 at the moment.
I'd probably be choosing not to feed, or very, very sparingly, like once every 2 or 3 days, and just pour a little bit in. But wheat germ, I noticed, had that effect, and that's something I will not sacrifice. You know, winter, typically from a Japanese standpoint, that the fish in the mud ponds are built up to maximum, so they're taking them to 110%, almost where in some cases they're a little bit excessive when they're harvested, knowing full well how they're lining them up for winter, where that will naturally be slimmed down and prep the body so it's ready for another really intense season.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, don't use wheat germ, but what you have to pay attention to is the fat content. That's the one I look at, because obviously fat will not digest. It literally will not melt below a certain point, and your fish's body temperature right now is mighty cold. So if they ingest too much fat, it is just going to sit there and not do anything.
Yeah, it's hard to get rid of fat on it. It's hard to get rid of fat on koi as well, isn't it? Or is that a myth?
No, it will, but you've got to control it. It's just anything. You don't want to be knowing you're putting fat in there that is literally just gonna sit there and cling to everything. It's pointless and it's dangerous. So yeah, that's what I look for: low fat, especially for cooler.
So if we was going into more, right, because I know that you like specialize in like using sake white, etc., in some of your heights or your shiros that you've done.
Yeah.
Would you mix that with another type of sake in order to get, or do you just keep to one type and that's your lot?
Yeah, again, because it depends what you're looking for. So that's the point. When you're feeding that, you're doing it for a very, very specific purpose. It's to purify the shiroji, nothing else. So why mix it with anything else that could counter against it? Because you want the full.
They've still got the same nutritional value, but you concentrate.
You want the full impact of that food. That's my thought on it. Likewise, you know, there's something I have against a lot of foods out there from a professional standpoint, is that a lot of growth foods out there on the market, they chuck colour enhancers in because it makes it seem like you're getting more bang for your buck.
Got you. So
that's not, you see, and then they're chucking colour enhancers in there that I wouldn't choose to use and don't want to use. So it's like all of a sudden, and that's why, again, it put me off a hell of a foods even trying them, because it's, again, artificial colour enhancers that don't do a great job. And what I'm choosing when I'm picking a food, I'm choosing to feed. Oh God, that's just a great question. Here we go, guys. What's your view on peaches and cream? I'm going to leave that one right there. It was a great seller when I used to work at my dad's shop, but I'll leave the rest there. Sorry, what was I saying?
About balancing and just having one type of nutrition.
That's it. So if I'm setting for growth and I just want growth, that's because I don't want anything in there messing around with the colour. So if I'm raising just Shiro Sori on their own, for example, I don't want colour food anywhere near them. Yeah, so I'll choose just to feed. In that case, I would choose sake growth or balance, depending on what I want from them. And in the case of other fish, if I want to colour enhance, I might want to do it at different ratios as well. So just with Go Sankey, for example, I'll probably tend to do 25% to a third colour enhancer in with growth. And that's just to support the colour and keep pushing it, while the environment and the intense growth is trying to push it down. It's just counteracting stuff. If I want to do it intensely, or like when I'm raising Deutz fish and metallic fish, I'll sometimes use it up to 50%, and then even sometimes at the height of summers, flip and use 100% colour food. Because without it, the sheer intensity of the heat and how quickly they're growing, it'll knacker the colour up very quickly. And then when that happens, you have to work twice as hard to bring it back to where it was and then actually develop it. So yeah, and again, when you actually look out there's so many of these other foods that aren't developed from a professional standpoint. They're developed by companies in-house thinking they know what's best. When you look at the Japanese brands, what's their testing field? Not only has Akari got these amazing laboratories scattered all across Japan and the best researchers, they've got the breeders as the testing pool.
Yeah.
And it's like, here, have this, tell us what you think. And that feedback, because that all just comes from them. You've got decades of experience behind it, and they know what to look for. So the whole thing's just, built properly.
Super. That helps me loads.
Regards the other foods, mate, I'm sorry I can't say. I think the best thing with this, I think I said it last week, is to consult with dealers that you're in with regards other stuff that they've probably got experience with or stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's like a minefield, mate, and it's like keep walking into a toy shop. There's just rows and rows and rows. But you know,
it's even Ikari do the staple and gold. So just a thing. I've been using that myself, trying to look for a cheaper alternative just for feeding fish that we're holding before they get shipped out and sold. Yeah. I can't get on with the stuff.
No, that makes sense.
Get on with the stuff. So it's not like it's all that. It's just that one range they created is just unbelievable. But yeah, for other stuff, I'm searching for another alternative for that other food as much as everybody else is at the minute, to be honest.
When you find the solution, share it.
I will. I'll be sure to. Spot on, mate. Spot on.
Perfect. So, great, mate. Real great, informative. Bang on.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure. So anytime, I'll probably get you back again in the future, mate.
Yeah, that'd be more than grateful to come on, mate. Anytime.
Spot on. And if you haven't already, guys, look up Crafty Coy on YouTube and hit that subscribe button and support what he's doing.
Thank you very much, mate. Really appreciate it. Take care, mate. All the best.
Right, guys, I'm just going to have a quick catch up on these comments very quickly before we bring our next guest in. We've got here, Matthew, can you give any info on how the Japanese get ready their mud ponds? For example, our ponds won't actually clay bottoms. Yes, a lot of them get, again, it's not something I've done a lot, but a lot of the guys still use lime when they're rotivating the bottom. A lot of them do get rotivated on the bottom, obviously dried out as much as possible before the snow gets in. And yes, some don't, unfortunately. It really varies breeder to breeder, and obviously some of them on a really, really tight schedule. So unfortunately, with the amount of ponds, some get missed. But yeah, they do their best to get them prepped and sterilised and cleaned for a new season. Obviously, one for disease prevention more than anything, but also, from what they've said, obviously it gets the clay sort of hungry and feeding, and just keeps the balance of the pond in good order. So that's as much as I can provide on that one. Here's another great one, guys. Just popped up. Nexus or drum filter? Not real simple, but overall, as a complete all-in-one system, and for the ease and value that they bring, I would go with a Nexus on that one because it suits a lot more people than a drum overall. Let's have a look what else we've got. Will Malvern, best ingredient for core enhancement, spirulina, hands down. You get different grades of spirulina from what I'm led to believe. Got to be careful with it. You obviously the better, stuff you want ideally. Cheap, nasty spirulina in foods just won't do a lot. It's a waste. But again, it's an ingredient that is quite pricey, but it's definitely spirulina. I tend to stay away from the stuff that sort of comes based from around like shrimp meal, creel meal, all of that. It can tend to give a really nasty, sort of like false enhancement to the skin, from my opinion. So yeah, stay away from them one, guys. And then last one, just going to catch up on now. During the height of summer, what's the highest protein you would feed? Being quite honest about it, I don't look at protein levels. Fat content, again, is one of the ones I pay the most attention to because it's important for growth. And just looking at protein is not going to give you what you need. Typically, a growth food will have more protein in it, but the real essential bit is the balance between protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Because when that's off in a food, what it's going to lead to is excessive sort of fat bellies that we don't want to get, and weight not being gained in the right way. There's a lot of science behind that. There's actually, we're working on some stuff with Koi Talk magazine at the minute with some guys to bring some of that content to market to help you understand it a bit better. But there's far more other important aspects to look at in the food, i.e., the fish meal content, and that being the primary ingredient. Obviously, when you flip a bag over, list of ingredients on the back are generally listed in order priority, and fish meals what you'd be wanting to see. If you ever see any with, because that obviously fish, that's where the protein's mainly coming from, and the fish need to be able to digest it. If you see anything based with poultry meal, absolutely run a mile. It's just not something I'll support. Good quality white fish meal is essential, and in a grow food especially, you need a good fat content. It needs to be around, I want to be looking for 10, 11, 12% around that. So loads more to it than just protein. It's the last one I'll look at, to be honest with you. So without further ado, he's been waiting a while. I'm going to bring our next guest in. This is John, recently set up, I think it was last year, I set up a new business called the Koi Guys, and we met at the back end of last year. And he's got some questions to bring in. So how you doing, John?
Yeah, not too bad, Ricky. That was very interesting. I very much enjoed that. That was good.
Yeah, me too. It's spot on. So what have you got to bring to the table, buddy?
Oh, yeah. What I wanted to talk to you about was maybe not so much sciencey stuff, but I wanted to talk about your experiences. Your experiences over in Japan, showing and sort of how sourcing fish and showing fish over there. Yeah. What sort of stuff you got up to over there?
Well, what specifics? What do you want to start with?
Well, let's start at the start. How did you get into showing over there? How did you choose the fish? How did you get on versus the Japanese and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the show scene is not something I started until about 2016, I think it was. So I've already been going, I think I can't remember when my first trip was, 2002, I think. A while back. I was only 12 at the time. I do remember that bit. Long time ago. So the showing, I sort of left it alone because my focus had always sort of been on, obviously at the time, I'm learning. I'm still just picking up as much knowledge and information as I can. And my focus had always been on the more sort of tatigoi side of the business, is looking at fish with potential, young fish that got the potential to grow into higher quality fish, not albeit fish that typically might go into a show, but just high quality ones, because there's a difference between a high quality fish and a high quality fish that can compete at a Japanese show. Japan is littered with fish of high quality. It's just when you talk the ones that are going to win them prizes, it shrinks down drastically. So I never paid a lot of attention to it. And it just come around. To be honest, at the time I was dealing with Narita a fair bit, buying quite a lot of fish. And obviously he has a lot of stuff available, and just visiting a lot more farms like Omasako and guys like that who are into the show scene a lot more. And it's obviously, you have to start asking, these are not easy fish to obtain either. So it's obviously took a bit of time building relationships up to get access to the stuff. And for me, to be honest, it was a new challenge, and that's what I fancied, because my eye, I'd literally always honed it in on looking at fish that are 6, 12, 18 months old at most, that could go the distance, improve, become better, and turn into high quality fish later in life. Now, then that's the flip side to looking at something that's 25 centimeters that can go and win a prize.
Yeah.
Because, and to be honest, my eye wasn't completely in tune to it. Yes, I understand quality, but I don't understand what can win the awards at the show. And I've not paid all that much attention to it either. So had a dabble.
You got to have a dabble, haven't you? Why not? In for a penny.
I had quite a lot of fish that year, acquired from a few places. It was for the Wakagoi show, which is the second biggest in Japan. So I would deem that the second biggest koi show in the world, in my opinion. It's for smaller fish, so maximum entry is up to 63 cm, I believe, in that one, because it is known as the show. That's it. And it went really well. I was quite shocked, to be honest. We had all these fish entered, and sort of got there in the morning, a few people running up to me, and the big shock was I'd picked up a Kukugyo prize, which is one of the real high level awards. Picked that up with a Sankey I'd bought from Oishi. I was absolutely blown away with that. Also picked up a Sabaki prize, which is one of the higher level awards, with a Komonryu. from Kawakami, and then dusted quite a lot of first prizes, thirds as well. It was a really good order, and it certainly inspired me to hit it again. And some of them fish went on Junior Koi Show a month or two later to win awards. Again, the Oishi Sankey picked up first prize, if I remember right. And sort of gone from there, really.
And what was the sort of reaction from the locals with you sort of entering? Were they encouraging, or was it sort of?
To be honest, they don't. The foreign influence in Japan now on the koi scene is massive.
Yeah,
long gone are the days where it was only Japanese people winning them top awards. It's littered with foreigners winning them now. It truly is an international show, really, and of the highest level. So. Yeah, it was good. Obviously, breeders you're dealing with congratulate you. They're all happy. It's good to get them prizes because they know as well. It inspires people to want to do more, and it drives the market for them fish for them.
Oh, bloody hell! I don't know if you can hear that. It feels like I'm ready for that to fall off. I've got the RAF flying over. I reckon.
Brilliant.
My next one was sort of like how did you find that fish? How did you sort of go about? Did you go to many different places, or did you sort of just stumble across it and say, that's the fish that I want to show?
Yeah, so at the case of like Narita does a cracking job of obviously setting it all up for his customers. He goes, he finds the fish, he gets them listed, he handles them at the show, does all the transportation entry and all the rest of it. So there it's just a case of being in at the events, getting the fish, because then you can't just go and buy them. A lot of them done events where it's either an auction that you're bidding in or lucky draw style. It varies quite a lot, so you're not always guaranteed to get what you're looking for. So that's quite easy, but to be honest with you, I prefer more of a challenge in it all. So the ones I've really enjoyed over the years is where I've gone and actually gone to the breeders and use my relationships and the challenge of trying to get them fish from breeders. You don't just walk in and there's like a pond in the corner that says "Fish for Koi Show."
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
Guys, so like the guys at NMD, for example, I had a Kajaku, I think, and a Shiro there over years, which were both first prize winners. And you walk in, and I know how them guys operate. So around the fish house, there's all these sort of like blue holding tanks scattered around that are covered over that generally all say "sold out" on them.
Yeah.
So I'm always lifting lids up, and it's like, and I stumbled across some of these fish, and he's like, all I have to do is look at them, and because I know them so, and it's like you know what's going off here. Man, it's like in one case, stumbled across this tank of Shirotsoras, and I'm like, what are these? He's like, sold. No, come on, let's get them in a bowl. Let's have a look. So you sort of get cracking on it, and I remember so well. I think it was like 4 or 5 fish got put in the bowl. It was up to about 25 cm, I think, maximum, and just one fish. I remember this year, it stood out so much, just everything, its sheer presence. And I literally said to the person who was with me at the time, that will win a first prize. I was that confident. Bought it, entered it. It did win a first prize. I was quite happy with that.
When you know, don't you?
Doesn't always happen. That's just one of the cases where it went well. But I was incredibly confident. It just had such a presence about the fish. But just stashed away in a tank, and you can't get it. And that's the same. A lot of them. Some of them you literally have to go in and ask, have you got anything you think's worthy for a koi show, and that'll depend on your relationship as to whether they'll open up and potentially say, here it is. Some of the guys that have the fish worthy of it don't want to, when the Himeji Castle's where one of the shows at the minute, right at the other end of Japan from Niigata, some of the guys just don't want to travel there. Logistically, it's a pain in the arse.
Yeah.
So sometimes they've got the fish, but don't want to do that side of it, which is a shame. But that is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and them sort of fish that you get there, were you getting sort of them at a reasonable price, or were they real high-end toppy sort of numbers?
Yeah, there's again, it's one of the challenges I like, is trying to find them at reasonable prices as well. But no, most of the time, fish that are good for a koi show, obviously the breeders aren't daft. Anybody who thinks they are is just dreaming. They already know, and they all carry a premium because there's so few in the batches. You talk a Shirotsory, it being able to be good enough to be entered at say 25 cm, It's got to have the body impact. It's got to have all the sumi up, the nice pattern formed. They are so few in the entire batch.
Yeah.
So they know it as much as we know it. If you want to get it off of them, you've got to pay the price. And yeah, they always carry a premium.
Is that sort of like a once in a spawning sort of fish, or is that sort of even rarer than that?
Not always. Some of them are. I mean, if we look at, there was a Benny Kikakuru from Aoki, which won the International Junior Koi Show. So obviously shocked everybody because it's typically a Gosanki that's winning. Yeah. But that fish was just mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing, and out of this world. In fact, I might make myself look a bit stupid here, but I
Don't worry about that, mate. I thought that's what you got me on for.
I seem to think we had it in the magazine. Just give me a second. Yes. So it was that fish.
Yeah. I was just flicking through that one actually, and came across that. Beautiful.
Absolutely phenomenal piece that, and obviously to go and beat all the Gosanki, serious Gosanki from serious breeders in the show is testament. But yeah, Aoki produces a lot of stunning Kikakuru every year that win prizes. Will he produce one that good, capable of doing what it did again? He might never do it again.
Yeah,
that's literally how special that fish was. He might never do it again because it just everything came together for that fish. And I don't know exactly how much that went for. I've heard whisperings, and we're talking sort of decent car money.
Oh bloody hell, yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, but they know it, and there's people out there who are prepared to pay it, and that's what dictates prices such as that.
And you think they're only one herring peck away from not even being there, are they?
Yeah, pretty much. The
stars have to allow all that stuff to happen. It's crazy.
It does, and that's the thing that you are dealing when you get into that koi show realm. Absolute one-offs. They're like one-off pieces of art, and I don't know much about that world, but I know people tend to make numbers up when it gets to one-off stuff. So
just whatever you like, just have it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Right. Well, that's a lot about Japan. I wanted to touch on what we were talking about before, if you don't mind, about stocking density. I don't know if you covered it before on here.
I think we might again touched on it last week. I can't quite remember, but it's certainly one to keep banging on about, I think.
Yeah, but just sort of giving an idea to people about how some formulas can't necessarily give you the full picture of what's going on in your pond. Maybe it comes down to more aeration, filtration, biofiltration.
Well, before it gets to it, obviously your background, just tell I can't remember which college it is you've just spent however long at.
So I was at Hadlow College at Greenwich University doing a fishery management and aquaculture degree. Yeah. Got a first.
Happy days.
Just throw that in there. Yeah, so I when you're talking about protein and stuff, that's very interesting stuff. Not all protein's born the same. When you brought up feather meal and stuff like that,
Oh yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, 45% protein, and it's all 45% feather meal. You might as well eat a table.
Yeah.
It's got literally zero nutritional benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but coming back to that stocking density thing, because I just did a video about it myself, and reading some stuff on forums and out there's a lot of misinformation about it. So if we could clear that up, I don't know.
So with that background you've got, I'm curious to know what the scientific teachings are, because I've never been taught about stocking densities. Everything I do with stocking is based on my experience, and that's it. So I'm curious to know what your teachings are, given the tutors and stuff you've had, what guidance there is.
Right, so that's a brilliant question, Ricky. Thank you. So what you're looking at, we usually do it a lot with salmon farming. So our last year was a lot to do with recirculatory aquaculture systems, land-based RAS with salmon.
Yeah.
And how you start working out these, how much fish you can fit in. It's not how many fish you can fit in the tank, it's how much feed you can put through the system.
Yeah, I think I touched on that last week.
Yeah, so there's a calculation. There's a big yellow book. I can't remember the name of it. Something like RAS or something like that. And it has a calculation in there where
sounds thrilling.
Yeah, it's not. It's trust me. I've fallen asleep in it like this many times.
Yeah, I can
basically,
imagine.
there's a calculation in there that gives you the information of how much protein you can give to a certain fish, and then that calculation will spit out how much ammonia is produced.
Yeah.
Which then you can do another calculation to create the surface areas, the biofiltration area needed to cope with that amount of feed fed.
Yeah.
So we're not even talking about stocking densities. You know, salmon, some of the top salmon boys are putting 120 kilos per cubic meter.
Yeah, that means absolutely naff all to me, but it sounds a lot.
Yeah, 120 kilos of fish per cubic meter of 1,000 litres of water.
Yeah.
That's good. And that is like top.
Yeah.
But they're not looking at how many fish they can fit in. It's how much feed they can put through, and what you touched on earlier. You know, the FCRs of weighing. So you grade and then weigh.
Yeah.
So food conversion ratios, of which, you know, how much feed do you feed for the fish to put on a certain amount of body weight?
Yeah.
So is it 1 to 1? So if you're feeding a kilo, does the fish put on a kilo of body weight? Which is really not true. Usually you get it about 1 to 2, 1 to 4, where if you're looking at pigs, you know, you're looking at 8 to 1, you know, looking at 8 kilos to one to put on 1 kilo. So you know, it's a good way to create protein, but stocking densities are not worked out the same way as koi keepers do, and it seems a bit.
And this I think this is the bit I've already taken from this, is obviously that you were talking about there is I'm not there where them guys are. Obviously commercially, you know, that could be the difference of them making a profit or not in a year, I'm guessing. Getting all that stuff right. So obviously we've got a lot of other things to take into consideration. One being, even you yapping on about all that, to be honest with you, it just I lose interest. Because that's true. I think that's the same. I think that's the same for I think that's the. But that's why I asked, because I think it's the same for a lot of guys out there. Some like the sciencey end of the hobby, but most people just want to keep the fish nice and healthy. I'm fully aware of that. When you want to move into the realms of really pushing them and raising them hard, you need to learn a bit more and get a bit more done. But we're just talking about guys who have got or women who've got a nice pond and just want to keep them fish happy and healthy in there.
And I can't agree with you more, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because it's what you want to get out of that pond. You know, if you've only got a small filter and a couple of fish in there, you know, that's fine, that's perfect. If that's what you want, or if you do want to grow on, you're going to have to upscale that filter. It's not about surface area of water per inch. You know, it's about these other variables that you have within your system and what you want to get out of that system to enjoy your hobby. You know,
so the bit I want to get across, I'm going to be really to the point about this right now, is especially if there's anybody out there quoting any of these mystical numbers of 1 fish per X amount of water or whatever it is, it's an absolute load of bollocks. And I cannot be more to the point about that. It's just a made up figure that holds no credibility whatsoever.
Exactly.
It doesn't, and I can't think, because there's too many variables to it. So unless we're going to go to the extent as you just described earlier of actually working, so there is a way of calculating this if you've got the know-how. Not everybody's going to college and spending all that time like you are, or that knowledge that your professors have done, and the guys who write them books, and frankly probably just not interested in knowing to that extent.
And that's exactly what we want to get across to you guys, is that, you know, these figures are not good. You know, if like Ricky said to me the other day, if that figure was correct, he'd have to take out 90% of his fish from what
I've seen, all them fish that are growing incredibly well, looking absolutely superb, happy and healthy, by the theory of some of them things, should all be dead. You know, and that's nobody can argue with that fact. I'm doing it and making it work and work properly. So I think the biggest thing is guys out there knowing how or when is enough, and you're literally only going to know that by what the fish and the water is telling you, and that's why it's key. If you cannot get on top of, obviously, water clarity here, not necessarily an issue. You could create water clarity problems through incorrect feeding or really excessive feeding, and the actual water quality still be okay. So you got to be careful there, but you're not going to know until you've got to a point in your pond where either you can't get that water right, you can't get your parameters in check, or the fish are continuously unhealthy. The more fish you get, obviously higher stocking densities, where it's the physical amount of fish, parasite problems, not necessarily it causes them, but it is a higher stress environment. There's no argument about that, especially with koi. So obviously the lower densities, for hobbyists, which most hobbyists have anyway. I can't think of anybody I've come across in all the years I've done this who keeps a garden pond stocked like any of the ponds I've got up at the facility.
No.
I just can't think it. And that's the point where stress levels are getting higher, and you're really having to manage it, closely daily to stop problems from happening. And it's not that it causes problems more frequently, but when a problem happens, i.e. you've got something stocked wall to wall, you get a Costier outbreak, that's going to spread and go through them like wildfire if you're not careful. And then the thing is with your physical stocking, as we know, the more physical fish you've got stocked in there, I think John's froze, the more physical fish we've got stuck or packed into them ponds, the more you need to feed them to keep them healthy, coming back to that topic. And that's when things get out of hand. So the more food that we're throwing in, it's more for the filters to cope with. I'm just going to take John off for a minute and wait and see if he gets sorted. He's back.
Internet's been playing up in the country.
It's all right, mate. So it's the more fish, then is the more food, and that comes back to that point. Food for me is the one that really whacks it out of balance. I can have ponds. Well, I'll give you an example. I've got my small quarantine tanks hold 400 gallons, and I will generally keep for the quarantine period in there, which can be anything up to 6 weeks. The quarantine period in there, I'm holding sort of 12 to 15 centimeter toe size, 300 to 350 fish in there. It's a hell of a lot, and they're being fed as well. It's not like they're not being fed at all, but they're not being fed like the growing ponds, and they couldn't be fed like the growing ponds because it would absolutely muck things up big time. So we're having some problems with John, so I'm just going to have a quick look over at the questions and see where we've got. Let's have a look. Mick Brooks, Mick's one of my customers, has been for a long time. What's your favourite variety? Explain best points to look for. Mine's Showa. Yes, I know full well, Mick. Favourite variety? That's an interesting one. It's one I can never seem to answer either. If we go based on what tends to be a lot of it from our facility at any one given time, Shirotsuori seems to be right up there, to be honest. I can count countless years where, it looks like we're just infested with them, and I can never seem to stop buying them. I think that particular year I mentioned I had about 4 different lineages up there that I was mucking about with in one way or another. And to be honest, Ginrin Showa takes a really sort of big place for me. I've always been a big fan. I love what Ginrin can actually add to them varieties, and know how difficult they actually are to produce at a high level. But one thing I'm always sort of keen to get across, my appreciation of koi is something I've always been focused on. For where I wanted to get to as a career or in the hobby, whatever you want to call it, my focus was always on knowing as much as I can about every variety and appreciating variety. So, say favorites, I generally like most varieties when it's a good example of one. And I can't really say no. You'll always see it's a good fish. Gets me excited, and you can get into that big time. I just think it's unfortunate that in the UK you don't get to see as many of these top examples of other varieties to be able to appreciate them in the same way that I've learned to. But I think them two I mentioned, Shirotsuori, Ginrin Showa, I have really got a soft spot for them. But other than that, Crafty Coy is another one, probably, to be honest. Big fan of Crafty, and that's something else I can see taking over the facilities before long, especially the Akawa lineage that he's thrown together. Them things are phenomenal, and look out for them coming to market this year because they're great. So just going to nip back. John seems to have got sorted. So you settled your bill up now, mate. Are they connected you again?
I'll put another pound in the back. Bit of coal. Working well now.
So yeah, I think, to be honest, mate, I've sort of covered everything off there on stocking from my side. But just to reiterate, for me, and it does touch with what you're saying. Food always seems to be the part that really does adjusting. It's not setting up the filter for the amount of fish; it's setting up the filter for the amount of food, and that obviously ties in with what you taught.
Yeah. That's the only way ammonia is getting into that system is through that protein in the feed.
Yes,
that's the only way. That's the only way that ammonia is getting in there, unless debris and stuff. But yeah, thanks so much, Ricky. That was amazing. I really enjoyed that. Thanks so much, man.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure. Yes. So yeah, and anybody obviously have a look. Look John up, the Koi guys. You'll find him on. He on YouTube now as well.
Yeah. I've got my first video. It's about stocking density. Funny enough.
Happy days. But yeah, just again for me, it's always, I love to see new dealers coming in. It's really important for the hobby that we get, new younger generation as well. Really important to keep things going, bring new fresh ideas in. So support needed, because getting any business off the ground is tough. So yeah, give John a look, and he seems more than willing to help and offer that advice up as well. So take advantage of it.
Cheers. Pleasure. Thank you very much, Ricky. I really appreciate your help.
No worries. Cheers, buddy. Right, guys, I'm just going to have a look through last bits of questions before we wrap up. So we've got Paul Griffiths here. How are you doing, Paul? What do you think of the fish being produced in the UK and other parts of the world apart from Japan? Japan will always be top producers. Yeah, absolutely. There's some guys out there doing some absolutely amazing stuff. But certainly, here in the UK, Mark at Cuttlebrook, he's built a fantastic business and producing some great fish. Can't follow because it's a tough slog, obviously, working against the reputation of Japanese fish all the while. It can be difficult, getting the pricing level where it needs to be to make a fish farm successful and the rest of it. But yeah. Great job producing some great fish. And yeah, we've got Adam Bayer springs to mind, also doing some exceptional work from what I've seen. Not managed to get over there and visit Adam yet, but certainly seems to be doing well. And following his social media, producing, dipping into some of the more unusual varieties as well, which is nice to see. And I think important for Koi Farm to have that diversity in order to make it a sustainable business. Certainly not when you're privileged to be a Japanese breeder who can specialize in a particular variety, knowing full well demand will generally, outstrip supply. So they're doing great. Other areas of the country, obviously, we've got the Jashiki Koi in Poland producing some awesome fish as well. Other countries, a lot of countries do produce good koi, but on levels. I think it's where it comes to Japan always seems to manage to take it up through them gears. And I think really that's just, you look at the knowledge that's around in the area, the teachings that get passed down from generation to generation. It's mighty hard to compete with. So but plenty out there doing great. Jordan, I believe we've got Jordan booked in to come on next week. It's his first time showing. What's the best piece of advice selecting koi for a show, whether in UK or Japan? Interesting one. In Japan, and these are very different approaches. In the UK, to be honest with you, I couldn't really comment because I've never managed to pick up myself what the sort of judging pattern is. I'm not going to get too into it. I think I've touched on it in a few of my videos. But pretty inconsistent, and it's not something I would obsess about. I think the most important thing, whether it be Japan or England, you need to really focus on learning and understanding about quality, because it's no good just going, based on patterns, especially in Japan. You've got to have the quality to back it up, more so than anywhere else in the world. Body shape in Japan will get you probably 70-80% of the way, to be honest with you. If it's not got the body, especially in the bigger sizes, you're not even in the running, because it's the first thing the eyes are seeing subconsciously most of the time. And that body and the presence of that body is what draws most people in to a fish. So really important to understand body and skin quality as well. And the sort of the finer details of skin quality. It's not just a case of kiwa and sashi. You're looking at luster, quality of the pigmentation, across different varieties. You've got metallic mustard to consider as well. So yeah, the best advice I can give overall is not to obsess too much about the fish being good for a show, is to really obsess about understanding the fine details of quality, and the rest will sort of come naturally. You know, that's when it's a case of just understanding what's a standout fish above and beyond. And to be honest, that's where pattern comes in. You know, pattern is not unimportant. It's incredibly important because, you know, when we're talking about quality, I think I said it earlier, there's bags of quality in Japan. The one thing that separates a lot of these fish is pattern element and the uniqueness and the quality of that pattern. So not to be ignored, but also not to be prioritized at the expense of the other elements, because that's just not going to be a fish worthy of winning on the biggest show scenes. So I hope that helps out with that one, Jordan. And yeah, hope to see you next week. Great question. I like look at from my ponds. I'm only buying males. Are you finding on the whole quality males is good? Absolutely. This is a drum I will keep banging and banging and banging, because we're at a point now where most of the UK market, I believe, or even European, has overlooked the value of male koi because of old stigmas and this big drive that everybody's got to buy female fish. Female fish in the market are on average at least typically 3 times more expensive than an equivalent quality male fish. When I'm in Japan, I find that constantly. And it's a huge, yeah, I just cannot see when we look back to typical, you know, the old fashioned male fish was a long skinny thing with big pecs and didn't look great. I completely agree with that. That's not how they are anymore, especially in the Go Sankey classes, and becoming more and more in the other classes, other varieties as well. The one copped up. We'll get back to that. Yeah, in the other classes, the bodies are getting better all the time as well. But certainly, if we look at Go Sankey, which obviously dominates a lot, especially around the show scene, and that's why a lot of people avoided male fish, because they say the body wouldn't be strong enough to compete with the females at the show or get the sizes. The All Japan Koi Show now has a male division, and the grand champion of the male division, if I remember right, this year was a Dainichi Toyota Showa, which was in the 90 boo class. So that fish is 90 cm plus to be sat in there. Fantastic body, absolute beast. That just says every other rule that's gone before that said males don't get size, just basically get them the middle finger. So absolutely not the case. And you know, in the size classes even below that, the 80s, the 70s, all the rest of it, they shed loads of fish in there. It's a super competitive division. And yeah, the quality of them is exceptional. The one thing for me that appeals about males is they've actually got completely a different body setup to females, and some might prefer it. Females are typically tend to carry the weight more proportionately over the whole body, and can in some cases, obviously if the egg gets out of hand, carry more weight in the bottom region, which is something I don't like to see. Males tend to carry all the weight over the shoulder region, so look incredibly powerful there, and taper off slightly into a, you know, a nice peduncle if you're getting a good body shape there. And it's a really attractive body, completely different to that of females. It's not one that a lot of females can actually develop. So yeah, a lot of things to them. And I would, again, males typically, if you know, colors can tend to be a lot more vibrant from a young age, more finished. Generally, you know, if you've got a small pond, and I'm talking small as being, you know, anything up to sort of 3,000-4,000 gallons, it's probably the best fish for you, because if the game, you can still raise them big enough in that environment, they're probably going to be easier to keep. You've not got the issues with any eggs. They're generally, you know, healthier, and they can be really strong and really robust. So massive advocate of them. But not only for me, it's the element of getting more bang for your buck, and it's something I'm keen for. And I constantly see people selecting inferior fish at the expense of buying female, and I cannot and will never get my head around that, because for me, I would be wanting to get the most fish for my money, and when you go shopping for males, that is what you are going to get, absolutely hands down. So yeah, no reason for me really to be avoiding them. I think the thing to note here now, however, is although the European market seems massively behind on this and still quite attached to paying the premiums for females, the rest of the world, Asia and Japan, are clicking onto the male business more and more. They know the quality's there now. I can actually see in the distant future a time where the males will probably be competing against the females at the koi shows in Japan on the biggest level. At the Wakagoi, the junior koi show, that's already been happening. I can't remember if it was last year's Grand Champion or year before. There was actually a male fish that won the Grand Champion award. So it pretty much says all that it needs to. The result of that, however, is prices at the top farms for males are now rising. So likewise, I think when the day comes where they can compete on a level playing field with females, and we go Sankey fish, I don't think it's too far away. Certainly, I'd probably expect to see it within the next 10 years. All of a sudden, you know, the price is just going to level up, and that's going to be a massive missed opportunity for everybody out there who literally now you can buy top quality fish at a fraction of the price of equivalent female just because it's male. So it's a typical supply and demand scenario, and as that global demand increases for them, as it is doing now in Japan and Asia, you will see the prices rise. Yeah, that's that one really. So yeah, we're just going to pick one more now for tonight, guys. So yeah, regarding buying one of my golden corn, all of a sudden I've had a surge on these. I am literally, guys, I'm down to my, what I'm going to call my stash, my learning fish that I want to push on for another year. I think when they go through, there's possibly only going to be one or two more. That's of the Nisai. However, I am working on getting some more Tosai secured for this year, hopefully more than last year as well. So there'll be plenty in the market for all you guys to get your hands on one and enjoy them the same way that I've been doing. Pretty fascinating. Certainly now that I'm seeing one or two sort of, you know, going where I sort of anticipated they would, and that coming to fruition, they're looking absolutely superb. So last question. That's quite a good one. So small pond, say 2K square pond, would you install spin drift or have an air sewn disc and have it in the corner? Yeah, this again, there's no, you're going to see loads of disagreement on this. My ideal pond setup, if I could give you that, and then you make your own judgment, I like to give a sort of single directional current. Now, bearing in mind that spin drifters do produce that kind of motion, that air current in a pond, which is what helps draw the waste towards them. That's not my priority. My priority is creating an environment where the fish are going to thrive and I'm going to get the most out of the body development. So what I tend to choose is to have all of my flow. A rectangular pond would always be my preference, ideally, but regardless of the pond, the principles are still the same. I would like the flow to be at one end of the pond. So my 3.5K ponds, I've got unaerated bottom drains. I've got the shower, return, and most of the aeration all at one end. So I've got a varied current that obviously reduces in its strength as we get down to one end, where I've got then a stiller end at the pond, naturally where the fish can get out of it, get out of the way, and a stiller end where they can feed. I generally don't like to see it where we've got these square ponds and all of a sudden you've got this massive air surging up the middle. I think that's going to create unrest. It's creating an unnatural current for the fish because it's quite a weird direction for them. And yeah, I regardless of the pond, would choose to sort of put it all to one end where possible, so there is a still area there that hopefully, you know, the fish can get away from and get a bit of rest if they want to. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. If any questions have been missed, Steve will be picking them up as he does. We keep a document of it all, so regardless of one of the lives or the pre-recorded videos that we do, slowly but surely we will work around and get into them all. I'd like to thank you all for taking your time up to watch me ramble on again. And yeah, we'll be back next week. Yeah, for episode 4. Can't wait for it. So yeah, thanks for watching.